In this video we're going to learn how to build a Plough Point shelter both using trees and trekking poles and look at the differences of both methods. We're also going to see a few flourishes to make these more structurally sound, and I'm going to start by building it in the incorrect direction towards the wind so you can see just how much shelter such a simple structure can offer and how easy it is to alter the direction it's built. So you can see just how simple a build this is. I've started by pegging the back corner down to the ground, then moved to the opposite corner of that, which will be the front. I've put the trekking pole through the loop on that corner and then added a guy line to keep the trekking pole upright. Amazingly, we've almost finished. All that remains is to peg the final two corners down and hopefully give it some solidity as a structure. However, you can see here I've built it the wrong way. Oh no, the wind is making it act like a sail rather than a shelter. What do we do? Deciding which would be the best direction to have the opening of our tarp, I've decided I'm going to leave the peg to the right hand side of the screen which will now become the back of the shelter. So again, I go to the opposite corner, I grab my trekking pole and my guy line and I stake it in, and suddenly we've got the wind coming from the back and lowest point of the shelter. You can see here that as I try to peg the sides of the shelter down, the trekking pole keeps falling over, and this isn't a huge problem because at this point we just want the pegs roughly in the correct place. We can tighten them up properly at a later date. So that's the absolutely basic shelter with the minimum of materials. Whereas I said we're going to have some flourishes and make it a little more stable, so I've added some pegs to the extra loops on the side the wind is approaching from. Now I'm taking a guy line to attach to the central loop of the shelter, which I'll then loop over my trekking pole. This is the second trekking pole, and then use another guy line to pull that out and stake it down, as you can see, significantly raising and removing the sag from the centre of the shelter. You might think that between the simplicity of the shelter and how low it is to the ground when using trekking poles that there isn't much space beneath it. But believe me, it's actually a huge usable area. These two camping mats are around 186 by 51 centimetres each, so you can see there's a huge amount of actual sheltered space. This has been made with a 2.9 by 3 metre Superlight Tarp from DD Hammocks, and just for full disclosure, they did send me that out for free. However, they didn't ask me to make this video, they didn't ask me to mention them or anything like that, and they certainly haven't paid me anything for any of this. So just so you know, it's basically a 3x3 tarp I'm using for these, and that's the particular one I happen to be using, but not because anybody paid me, unfortunately. These are my acting skills, illustrating I've got enough space to sit up straight and have something to eat at the front end of the tarp. The drawbacks to this are, of course, that a lot of that indoor space is very low to the ground, and of course the front is very open to the elements. However, it also is very stealthy because of that low profile, and it's incredibly quick to set up and also break down if you needed to. So that's the shelter built with trekking poles, but if we want a little more headroom, we may be better off looking for a tree. So this time, instead of pegging down the rear of the shelter first, I'm going to be looking to attach the front end and the highest point of the tarp to an overhanging tree. So here I've attached my guy line around that very thick trunk of a tree, and now using a simple toggle system with a piece of wood, I've attached the tarp to that loop. This is a simple and clear illustration close up of how the toggle system works. It's very simple. I pass the loop on the guy line through the loop on the tarp, place the twig through it, and as you can see it then stops it being pulled back through. There are a couple of great benefits to the toggle system. Firstly, it means there's no need to create a direct knot tying the two materials together. But secondly, and possibly more importantly, it's incredibly quick to undo and therefore collapse our shelter. So in this case, you can see in 1 second I can go from a head height shelter to something that might be a lot more difficult to spot if you were trying to hide from somebody. Returning to the build, once we've got that front edge attached to the tree, we're simply going to peg out the rear and then peg out the two sides and make sure everything's nice and square and how we want it to be. Of course, if you were going to stop here for a while, you might wish to add some extra pegs to the ground just to keep that nice and close and stop the draft getting in. And of course, if you wanted to be really fancy, you might also add some extra guy lines to the loops on the front edges of the tarp. For the purposes of this video though, I'm just going to add an extra guy line to that central loop of the shelter, but instead of using a trekking pole to remove that sag, of course here in the woods we can use a tree again. So one of the things to be aware of here, if you're maybe attaching the tarp to some flimsy trees, if the wind gets up and they start to blow around, they could easily tear the tarp with the extra tension the movement might generate. Once again though, we've got this huge headroom here where I can practically stand upright. But that does mean you're far more open to the elements when you're lying down or on the ground in this shelter. Of course, it's easy enough to change the height of a shelter like this when using a tree, because you could change your attachment point, you could use a longer guy line, or you could even use an entirely different tree. If this video has been useful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing and checking out my other tarp shelter videos. If you really want to help me out and support the channel, please consider becoming a channel member or a PayPal supporter or Facebook subscriber. You'll find links in the description. And I'd like to thank my current and recent supporters. That's Sean B, Melissa L, Dawn H, A Sanford, T Seymour, The Yacht Captain, Fufarito, David D, and Kaz G. Thank you very much, everybody. Until the next time, keep it tarp-worthy, keep it interesting, have a fantastic day, and of course, farewell.